Welcome back. You're still watching Your Story. Now, to discuss that High Court ruling a little bit earlier on, granting the Reserve Bank permission to liquidate the assets of VBS Mutual Bank, we're now joined from our Polokwane studios by political analyst Elvis Masoga. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and good afternoon to you.
Peter, good afternoon to you and all the viewers of SABC News.
All right, so we arranged this conversation around the VBS, but I think with the breaking news that's just happened, perhaps you can help us by giving us your reaction to the resignation of Malusi Gigaba as the Minister of Home Affairs.
Peter, it is extremely sad indeed to witness a great phenomenal leader falling from grace, because if we thoroughly and honestly analyze who Malusi Gigaba is, he was both great, inspirational, phenomenal, and also flawed. But it applies to all great leaders on earth. Even the greatest leaders in history had their own weaknesses and faults. And I think Malusi Gigaba belonged to that rare breed of great phenomenal leaders who had his own weaknesses and faults. So in as much as maybe he has to fall from grace, let us not forget the great inspirational role that he played in our democracy, and most importantly in the emancipation of our country. So it's a bittersweet reaction. I regret, the mistakes and blunders that he did, but at the same time I rejoice in the phenomenal contribution that he made to our constitutional democracy. So he was a great leader, although he had his own weaknesses.
So the timing of this resignation, a day before the deadline that had been set for the president by the public protector, so people speculating that he would have been fired tomorrow had he not resigned today. Do you think that this exercise, and in his letter he said, I'm doing this for the good of my country and for the party that I belong to, and not to put any pressure, undue pressure on the president. Do you think that he took all of these things into consideration to save the party, save the country as he believes, and the president?
Peter, what I've reliably learned in my capacity as a researcher is that last week the national officials of the ANC accepted a recommendation from the president that he must take some steps or remedial steps against Malusi Gigaba. And I also learned that on Sunday, the president probably met with Minister Malusi Gigaba to communicate his intention to relieve him of his duties as a minister. So I think what Malusi Gigaba is doing today to resign, it is not from the goodwill of his heart. It is never his intention. I believe the president communicated his intention to Malusi that, Minister, understand as the president, I've taken a decision to relieve you of your duty, but to preserve your dignity and your grace, it is better for you to communicate in public that you are resigning. Write a resignation letter to me as a president, then I will accept it. And that's how ANC operates. Remember, they are comrades. They've been in the trenches together. They don't want to humiliate their fellow comrades. In the ANC, the president will nicely talk to you as a comrade to say, I don't want to fire you, because when I fire you, you will lose your dignity. The best way, tender your resignation. So that's what I've learned has happened.
Might we see other resignations in the coming weeks?
Let's be honest, Peter. My observation is that this state capture commission, it is becoming a python that may end up swallowing almost all the leaders of the ANC. Whoever thought that the great Nhlanhla Nene could be implicated in the Gupta saga? Whoever thought that even the name of Private Gordon could be implicated? And when you have been observing the parliamentary discourse, it is plus or minus 90% of the current ministers have somehow met with the Guptas. And if we use meeting with the Guptas as a yardstick that must determine which minister must resign, then I don't want to lie to you, Peter, plus or minus 90% of the ministers have to step down. So it has become a python that is swallowing up all the leaders of the ANC. Maybe it was an oversight on their part. They never thought that even almost all leaders of the ANC can be implicated, because you will find that even in the NEC, previously from 2010, you find that some members of the NEC directly met with the Guptas before these scandals about the Guptas could emerge in public.
All right, okay. So let's move on to VBS now. So the court has given the Reserve Bank permission to liquidate this bank, and that's the end of it. That's the end of an era. What are your thoughts on that? Because there are some people who are saying we should do everything in our power to save the bank, punish the perpetrators or the people that are found guilty of crimes, but don't shut the bank down. And the Reserve Bank is saying that this company is hopelessly insolvent and cannot be saved.
You know, Peter, my firm assessment in terms of this saga is that the South African Reserve Bank is applying a double standard here. Because firstly, they agreed that VBS must be placed under curatorship. Remember, when you place a bank under curatorship, you simply imply that you still have faith in the bank being restored. You just want to develop some measures so that you can restore it to good health. But out of the blue, now they are talking about liquidation, because when you liquidate a bank, it simply implies that you are now killing it. You no longer see any future or prospect in relation to that bank. It is an application of double standard. What happened to the African Bank? Remember, some few years ago, African Bank, fell into a doldrums of bankruptcy, but the Reserve Bank did everything possible to save it. Today, African Bank is functioning well. I think it was very unfair and hypocritical on the part of the Reserve Bank to decide to liquidate a bank that had the potential to can be saved. Because the most important thing was for the Reserve Bank to determine whether are there new buyers who can buy out VBS. Are there prospects on the part of government who can inject some funds so that VBS can be saved? It is a black-owned and controlled bank. Check. Statistics show that the top 4 banks in South Africa dominate 85% of the banking market in South Africa.
All right, that may be so.
Where are the black players?
This may be so, but the facts on the ground are that this bank was looted and people were stealing. The other problem that this bank has is that people have lost faith in the bank. And whenever you have a run on a bank, people wanting to take their deposits out, it's very difficult to revive that bank. And then people have lost money. So instead of losing even more, isn't it better to cut your losses and try and recover as much as you can and draw a line in the sand?
No, I agree with you, Peter, in terms of accountability, holding those who looted the bank to account. Absolutely. All the looters, the thieves and squanderers who bankrupted that bank must face the full wrath of justice. That one, there is no question mark over it. But the issue is, here it's a bank. The problem is not the bank. The problem is with the people who looted the bank. That is why even when African Bank was in liquidity crisis, there was an agreement in the Reserve Bank that the bank, the name itself is not a problem. The problem are the people who made it certain that the bank collapsed. So with regard to VBS, I think let's concentrate on the source of the problem. The problem is not the brand. The problem are the personalities who are managing the bank executives who looted it. So I don't think it was wise on the part of the Reserve Bank to recommend liquidation of VBS, because it's a black bank. Other potential bidders could have been allowed to buy it out so that the license of that particular bank continues. But right now, when you liquidate it, it means the license that was given to VBS will come to an end.
Why not just give a license to a new black investor for a new license? Why not just close VBS and start a fresh bank?
No, it is not necessary to close a bank whose brand does not have a problem, because like I said, Peter, the problem was not caused by the brand. The problem was caused by the personalities who were managing the bank. So it means the brand of this particular bank, VBS, does not have any problem. You just find new prospective bidders who are going to buy it out, settle outstanding liabilities, and continue. Because right now, we must think about ordinary people who deposited with that particular bank. It is the responsibility of the Reserve Bank to find new players who are willing to buy out the liabilities of VBS and continue. Even government must inject the coffers into VBS. Why did government bail out African Bank when it was in trouble? Are we applying double standards here? I don't agree with that decision at all, Peter.
All right, so Mr. Masoga, you're saying that this bank can be saved. Are we saying that the accountants, the professionals, the auditors who understand finance don't know what they're talking about? When they say that it's hopelessly
their decision
insolvent.
is misguided. No. I agree with them when they say it is insolvent, but being insolvent is not an automatic condition for liquidation. A company can be insolvent, placed under curatorship. You design remedial measures that must take that particular bank out of insolvency. That is exactly what happened to African Bank. African Bank was insolvent. Why was it not liquidated? Because the Reserve Bank and other role players realized that if it can be placed under curatorship, we manage the finances correctly in the coming 12 months, then obviously the bank will be able to run its affairs on its own. Why can't we do the same thing to VBS? It is insolvent, yes, but it is not dead. Insolvency does not mean that an institution is dead. It simply means we put new measures in place to try to restore the health of that particular bank.
All right, Mr. Masoga, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and giving us your insights on these two issues. Thank you so much. All right, that was political analyst Elvis Masoga talking to us from our studios in Polokwane.